The ancient weapon floated in red light, silent and still. It had been this way for 347 years. Warriors came from every corner of the galaxy to touch it, to prove they were worthy. The weapon rejected them all. The temple stood on the capital world of the Vryn Dominion. High Priest Velmoth watched another warrior approach the blade. This one was a Thraken, covered in scars from 200 battles. The warrior was confident. He had killed countless enemies. Surely the blade would choose him. The warrior reached out his clawed hand. The red light around the blade flickered once, then went dark. Rejected. The warrior screamed in anger and shame. Guards escorted him away. Velmoth had seen this happen thousands of times. He no longer felt surprised. Perhaps the blade would never choose again. Then 3 humans entered the temple. They wore simple gray uniforms. The Vryn had invited them as a courtesy. Humans were new to the galaxy. They had no great warriors, no legendary battles, nothing that would impress the ancient weapon. But the Dominion welcomed all species to try. Velmoth studied the 3 humans. 2 men and 1 woman. The first man was tall and moved with quiet confidence. The woman had the eyes of a soldier, always watching. The third man was shorter with a friendly face. He smiled as he looked around the temple. "I am Velmoth," the priest said in Galactic Common. "You may each approach the blade once. Rejection brings no shame. The greatest warriors in the galaxy have been refused." The tall man went first. His name was Taman. He bowed respectfully and reached for the blade. The red light stayed cold and unchanged. Rejection. Taman stepped back without complaint. The woman named Mira went next. She studied the blade carefully before touching it. Again, nothing changed. The blade remained silent. She nodded and returned to her companions. The third human stepped forward. "Your name?" Velmoth asked. "Doyen," the man said with a slight smile. "My friends call me Lucky." "You may approach." Doyen walked toward the blade, but he was not looking at it. He was looking at the temple walls, at the ancient carvings, at the statues of war gods. His eyes were full of wonder. "This place is amazing," Doyen said aloud. "The architecture must have taken decades to build. And that mural over there, is that the Battle of Crimson Nebula? I read about that battle. 17 fleets destroyed in one day." He reached the blade almost without thinking. He was still admiring the temple decorations. Then he saw something that made him laugh. It was a carved face on a pillar. Time had worn the stone in a strange way. The stern warrior face now looked confused and surprised. Doyen laughed quietly. "Sorry," he said, still smiling. "That face looks like my uncle when he tried to build furniture with the wrong instructions." He placed his hand on the blade's handle. The temple exploded with white light. The red glow shattered like breaking glass. The blade began to hum. The sound was not in the air, but in the bones, in the blood, in the soul itself. White light filled every corner of the temple, brighter than any star. Velmoth fell backward, shielding his eyes. In 100 years of service, he had never seen anything like this. Even legendary champions of the past had created only small flickers of light. This was a supernova. Doyen stood frozen, his hand on the blade. The weapon lifted itself from where it had rested for centuries. It wrapped itself around Doyen's palm as if it belonged there. Ancient symbols glowed along its length. These were words from languages that died before humans existed. "What is happening?" Doyen whispered. Velmoth found his voice. It shook with emotion he had not felt in decades. "The blade has chosen. After 347 years of silence, it has chosen." The light slowly faded back to red, but everything had changed. The blade stayed in Doyen's hand. It would not leave. The human held the weapon awkwardly. He looked between the blade and the priest with complete confusion. "I do not understand," Doyen said. "I am not a warrior. I study water systems on colony worlds. I am a hydrologist. This must be a mistake." Taman and Mira rushed forward. Their faces showed amazement and worry. Temple guards stood at attention, their weapons raised in salute. This was an ancient gesture of respect for one chosen by the blade. Velmoth approached slowly. "The blade of Korvan makes no mistakes. You are its 13th champion. By ancient law, you must now serve the Vryn Dominion in the war that is coming." "War? What war?" The priest's face became dark with worry. 5 cycles ago, we detected a signal from beyond the galaxy. The Devourers are returning. They consumed entire sectors in the last age. Every species lost billions of lives. Whole civilizations were erased. The previous champion, Krelmoth, died in the final battle 347 years ago. He took the secrets of victory with him. Velmoth gestured at the murals on the walls. We have been preparing. We have built fleets and trained armies. But the blade would choose no one. We feared the war god had abandoned us. We feared the devourers would return and find us without a champion. Doyen looked down at the weapon in his hand. It felt natural there, like his own arm. The blade seemed to pulse with his heartbeat, but he did not understand why. I have never fought in a war, Doyen said quietly. I have never even held a real sword before today. The blade does not choose fighters, Velmoth replied. It chooses something we cannot name or understand. But it has never been wrong. All around them, bells began to ring. These bells had been silent for over 3 centuries. The sound echoed through the temple and across the entire capital city. People of many species stopped what they were doing and looked toward the temple. They knew what the bells meant. A new champion had been chosen. Doyen stood in the center of the temple holding a god's weapon. He had come only to see ancient buildings and learn about history. He liked old architecture and interesting stories. Now he held a legendary blade that could reshape the fate of the galaxy. I am just a water engineer, Doyen said to no one in particular. I fix broken pipes and design filtration systems. I am not special, but the blade disagreed. It glowed steadily in his hand, warm and somehow comforting. It had waited 347 years. It had rejected thousands of powerful warriors. And then it heard a human laugh at a carved face, and it knew. This was the one. Velmoth watched Doyen with new eyes. The human looked confused and worried. He did not look like a legendary champion. He looked like an ordinary person who had stumbled into something far beyond his understanding. Perhaps, the priest thought, that was exactly what the galaxy needed. The age of the 13th champion had begun, and nobody, not even Doyen himself, knew why the blade had chosen a man who studied water and laughed at worn stone faces. But the war god Korvan knew, and soon the galaxy would understand. The War Council gathered quickly after the blade chose Doyen. They met in a huge chamber made from black crystal. Holographic displays filled the room with battle maps and fleet positions. All of them showed disturbing information about the devourers approaching from the edge of the galaxy. Doyen stood in the center of the room. He still held the blade. He had tried to put it down, but the weapon would not leave his hand. It had become part of him in a way that made no sense. Supreme Commander Thelkar looked at Doyen with obvious doubt. The old general had fought in 50 battles. His armor was covered in scars. He did not look happy about the blade's choice. This is our champion, Thelkar said. This small creature who studies water. The blade has chosen, Velmoth said firmly. We do not question its wisdom. I question everything, Thelkar growled. Our survival depends on questioning. He turned to Doyen. Human, can you even lift a standard battle rifle? Yes, Doyen said, not sounding sure. I completed basic training. Colony worlds require it, but I am really not a soldier. Show me what the blade has given you. Thelkar pointed to a training area. Attack the combat drone. A machine lowered from the ceiling. Its sensors glowed red. This was a training drone used across the Dominion. Even on its easiest setting, it could defeat untrained fighters in seconds. Doyen looked at Taman and Mira. Taman nodded encouragement. Mira watched with intense focus. I do not want to break anything, Doyen said weakly. The drone can be replaced, Thelkar replied. Your pride cannot attack. Doyen sighed and stepped into the training circle. The blade felt impossibly light in his hand now. It seemed to be made of thought instead of metal. The drone circled him, analyzing how he stood and moved. The drone struck with blinding speed. Doyen moved faster. He did not think about it. His body simply reacted. The blade swept up in a perfect arc and blocked the drone's attack. Metal screamed against the ancient weapon. The drone adjusted and came at him from 3 directions at once. Doyen's body flowed like water. Each movement was smooth and precise. The blade sang through the air, blocking strikes that should have been impossible to see. Within 5 seconds, the drone was in pieces on the floor. Smoke rose from its broken parts. Doyen stood breathing hard, staring at what he had done. I did not know how I did that. The council chamber went silent. Even Thelkar looked shaken. The blade remembers, Velmoth said quietly. Every warrior who has wielded it. Every technique. Every battle. It teaches its champion without words. Increase difficulty, Thelkar ordered. Maximum setting. Commander, that level is designed for master fighters, a technician protested. Do it. 3 more drones appeared. These were larger and carried real weapons. Training weapons, but still dangerous. They attacked together using tactics developed over thousands of years. Doyen destroyed them in 12 seconds. This time his mind went somewhere else. Somewhere calm and distant, his body became a storm of exact violence. The blade moved through forms from dead civilizations. It combined techniques that should not work together but somehow did. When the last drone fell, Doyen stood in a circle of destruction. He was not even breathing hard. The blade glowed as if pleased. Well, Thelkar said after a long moment, perhaps the blade knows something I do not. The question is not if he can fight, another council member said. Her name was Rintel. She communicated through musical tones. The question is if he can lead. Previous champions commanded fleets. They inspired species to fight beyond their limits. They became legends. Everyone looked at Doyen. He still appeared uncomfortable with the attention. I am not a leader, Doyen said. I work with small teams. I solve technical problems. I do not inspire people. You made the blade choose you, Velmoth said. Something in you called to a weapon that has been silent for centuries. We need to understand what that something is. Mira stepped forward. May I speak? Thelkar gestured permission. I have known Doyen for 6 years, Mira said. We have worked on 4 colony missions together. He is not a warrior. That is true, but he is the person everyone goes to when things fall apart. When our water system failed on Kepler 442b and we faced death from dehydration, Doyen worked for 70 hours without rest to fix it. When the colony children were terrified of the native animals, Doyen spent his evenings teaching them about the creatures. He turned their fear into curiosity. He does not lead by commanding. He leads by showing people there is always another way forward. Taman nodded, and he never takes himself too seriously. Even when things are terrible, he finds something to laugh about. It keeps people from breaking down. Laughter, Thelkar said with contempt. That will surely defeat the Devourers. The previous champion, Krelmoth, was famous for his ferocity, Velmoth said slowly. He was called the Crimson Death. He was unstoppable in combat. He had perfect discipline and showed no mercy. But when the final battle came, something failed. The records are unclear, but witnesses say Krelmoth became paralyzed by his own rage. His fury consumed him and he fell. The priest looked at Doyen with understanding. Perhaps the blade has learned. Perhaps it needs something different from rage to face what is coming. The Devourers will arrive within 2 cycles, Thelkar said. He pulled up a display showing the galaxy's edge. Space itself seemed to be darkening there. We have 600 fleets positioned across the barrier zone. We have prepared for 300 years. But last time we lost 90% of our forces before driving them back. They learn. They adapt. They consume not just matter but energy and information itself. He turned to Doyen. Can you command a fleet? No, Doyen replied honestly. Can you develop strategy for 1,000 battles happening at once? No. Then what can you do? Doyen looked at the blade in his hand. It pulsed with strange inner light, warm and somehow reassuring. I can learn, he said quietly, and I can adapt. That is what I do. I find solutions to impossible problems. Water systems, ecology, social dynamics, they are all just systems. Maybe war is too. War is not a water pump, Thelkar said flatly. No, Doyen agreed. It is more complex. But complexity does not mean impossible to solve. It means you need to understand all the parts and how they connect. He looked at the council. I do not know why the blade chose me. I do not know if I can be what you need. But I know I will not be like the previous champions. I cannot be. I am not them. Then what will you be? Rintel sang. Doyen thought about the question. Something new, he finally said. Maybe that is the point. You have been preparing to fight the last war, but the Devourers have adapted. So maybe we need to adapt too. Velmoth smiled. It looked strange on his alien face. The blade has never chosen the same type of warrior twice. Each champion brought something unique. Krelmoth brought fury. Perhaps you will bring perspective. Or bring doom to us all, Thelkar muttered. But he straightened and gave a formal salute. Very well, champion. You have 2 cycles to prepare. We will give you every resource the Dominion has. Teachers, strategists, historians, warriors. Learn quickly. The Devourers do not wait. And you should know, the commander added. Other species will want to meet you. Many have been waiting for the blade to choose. There will be ceremonies and oaths and politics. You represent more than yourself now. Doyen felt the weight of the blade in his hand. 2 cycles to prepare for a war that nearly destroyed the galaxy last time. 2 cycles to become a leader of species he had never met. 2 cycles to learn strategies he did not understand, while wielding a weapon of godlike power. The blade had chosen him because he laughed at a carved face. Okay, Doyen said, because what else could he say? Where do we start? Thelkar's expression might have been a smile. We start by teaching you to hold that blade properly. You grip it like a gardening tool. Despite everything, despite the pressure and fear and impossible expectations, Doyen found himself laughing. It was a nervous sound, but genuine. Several council members looked confused.
Mira shook her head with a slight smile.
The blade of Korvan pulsed brighter, as if pleased. Perhaps the weapon knew what it was doing after all. Training began at dawn by Vryn time. The capital world operated on a 26-hour cycle that made Doyen constantly tired. He stood in the grand arena where champions had trained for thousands of years. The walls were scarred by weapons that could split atoms. The floor had been replaced 17 times after being destroyed in training battles. His instructor was Master Chiral. She was a Hesh warrior with 4 arms and bronze scales. She stood 3 meters tall. Each of her 4 hands held a different weapon. She had trained 2 previous blade champions. The blade makes you fast, Chiral said. Her voice was deep and rumbling. It makes you strong. It gives you the instincts of dead masters. But these things are useless if you do not understand why you fight. She attacked without warning. Doyen's body moved on its own. The blade blocked her strikes with precision he did not consciously control. But Chiral was not a training drone. She was a real warrior. She adapted instantly, changing her attack patterns, using her 4 arms to create impossible combinations. Doyen found himself defending desperately. His mind could not keep up with what his body was doing instinctively. You fight like a collection of other warriors, Chiral said while attacking. No unity, no purpose. You are a library of techniques with no story connecting them. She swept his legs. Doyen fell hard on his back. The blade stayed in his hand, but 4 weapon points were at his throat. Again, Chiral said. They repeated the exercise 17 times. Doyen lost every time. By the final attempt, he was exhausted, bruised and frustrated. You have learned nothing, Chiral announced. I learned that I am terrible at this. Doyen gasped from the floor. No. You learned that skill without understanding is empty. The blade gives you the how. You must provide the why. She sat down beside him. It was an oddly casual gesture from such an imposing warrior. Why did the blade choose you, human? I do not know, Doyen admitted. Everyone keeps asking me that. I am not special. I am just myself. The blade has chosen 12 champions before you. I trained 2 of them. The 11th champion, Sarthen, was chosen because she understood sacrifice. She could see the value in every life lost. She could calculate acceptable casualties without losing her compassion. The 12th champion, Krelmoth, was chosen because he understood absolute commitment. He never hesitated. He never doubted. He never compromised. Chiral studied him with large reptilian eyes. What do you understand? Doyen thought carefully. I understand systems, he said slowly. How things connect. How changing one element affects everything else. When I look at a water system, I do not just see pipes and pumps. I see relationships, dependencies, feedback loops. And this helps you? It helps me find elegant solutions. The best fix is not always the obvious one. Sometimes you solve a pressure problem by adjusting temperature. Sometimes you fix contamination by changing flow rates instead of adding filters. Chiral's eyes narrowed. Show me. She stood and gestured to the arena. This is a battlefield. We have 600 fleets positioned along the barrier zone. The Devourers will attack from multiple directions simultaneously. Standard doctrine is to meet force with force. Maintain the line. Prevent breakthrough. How would you defend it? Doyen stood, his exhaustion forgotten. This was a problem. Problems he understood. I need more information. What do the Devourers want? To consume everything, that is a goal, not a tactic. How do they operate? What is their pattern? Chiral pulled up holographic displays showing records from the last invasion. Doyen watched carefully. His engineer's mind automatically analyzed the data. The Devourers moved like a dark wave, overwhelming defenses through mass and persistence. But there was something else in how they concentrated their attacks. They do not consume randomly, Doyen said. They target nodes, places where multiple civilizations connect, high-density areas. He manipulated the display, highlighting patterns, and after they take a node, they pause. They are processing what they consumed, integrating it. This is known, Kirill said. We position our strongest fleets at predicted nodes. But that is like trying to plug every leak in a dam. You are reactive, playing defense. Doyen paced. The blade moved with him as if thinking alongside him. In a water system, when you have contamination, you cannot stop at the source. You do not defend every pipe. You create a purge point, a place where the system naturally concentrates the contamination. Then you neutralize it there. You suggest we allow them to break through. I suggest we guide them to where we want them to go. Doyen's mind was racing now. He was seeing the battle as a vast system with inputs and outputs, pressure points and release valves. The Devourers target nodes because those locations offer the most resources. What if we created a false node, something that looks incredibly valuable but is actually a trap? Kirill's expression was unreadable. Explain. We need more data on how they sense targets. But if we can understand their detection method, we could build a lure. Draw a significant portion of their forces to a location we choose, a place where we have prepared the optimal defensive position. Instead of spreading our forces thin trying to defend everything, we concentrate overwhelming power at a single kill zone. The risk is enormous. If the lure fails, they could devastate an actual population center. Every strategy has risk, Doyen said. The question is whether it is better than the alternative. Your records show last time the Devourers broke through in 47 locations. You won through attrition, grinding them down over decades. Can you afford to fight that way again? Kirill was silent for a long moment. Then she laughed. A deep rumbling sound that echoed through the arena. This is why the blade chose you. You do not think like a warrior. You think like a human. Is that good? It is different, and perhaps different is what we need. She offered him one of her 4 hands. Come, the War Council should hear this theory. They will likely reject it, but you should learn to argue your position. As they walked from the arena, Doyen saw Taman and Mira waiting at the entrance. They had been watching. That was incredible, Taman said. The way you analyze the invasion patterns. It is probably completely wrong, Doyen interrupted. I am making assumptions based on incomplete data about an enemy I have never seen. I could be leading everyone to disaster. Or you could be seeing something everyone else missed because they are too close to it. Mira said. That is what you do. Doyen. You come in as an outsider and see the obvious thing everyone overlooked. The fate of the galaxy is slightly higher stakes than a broken water pump. The principle is the same, she replied. And you know what else? You are not frozen by the pressure. Krellmoth became more rigid as the war progressed. More certain, more unwilling to adapt. You are already questioning your own assumptions. They walked through the temple complex toward the council chamber. Along the way, beings from a dozen species stopped to stare. Some bowed. Others made religious gestures. A few watched with open doubt. They are betting on whether I will survive the war, Doyen said quietly. They are betting on whether any of us will survive. Taman corrected. You are just the focal point. No pressure. Doyen laughed despite himself. You are terrible at reassurance, I know. But I am excellent at hydrology paperwork. We make a good team. They entered the council chamber. The War Council was already assembled. Thelkar stood at the center, reviewing fleet positions. He looked up as they entered. Champion, we have received word from the sensor arrays. The Devourers have begun their approach. They are ahead of schedule. We now have 1 cycle to prepare, not 2. The chamber went silent. 1 cycle, roughly 42 Earth days. Doyen felt the blade pulse in his hand, responding to his sudden fear. He took a breath and forced himself to think clearly. Then we need to accelerate everything. I have a theory about the Devourers' targeting systems. I need access to xenobiologists, information warfare specialists, and anyone who understands how they process what they consume. You wish to mount an operation with 1 cycle of preparation? Thelkar asked with disbelief. I wish to try something different from waiting for them to hit us, Doyen replied. Master Kyril can explain my tactical proposal. But the core idea is this. We have been thinking of the Devourers as an unstoppable force. What if they are actually a very advanced system? Systems can be manipulated. They can be hacked. They can be fed false data. He stepped forward, meeting the commander's skeptical gaze. I am not a warrior. I will never be a warrior, but I am very good at breaking systems and rebuilding them in unexpected ways. Maybe that is what the blade needs right now. Not someone who can fight better, but someone who can think differently. Thelkar studied him for a long moment. Then surprisingly, the old general smiled. You know what the problem with most champions has been? They believe their own legends too quickly. They become what everyone expects instead of remaining who they are. He gestured to the displays. Show us your crazy theory, human. We have one cycle to make it work or die trying. No pressure, Taman whispered. Doyen began explaining his idea. It was bold, probably impossible, definitely insane. But as he talked, as he showed the patterns he had identified and the system weaknesses he thought might exist, he saw something change in the council members' expressions. Not certainty, not confidence, but hope, and sometimes that was enough. 28 days until the Devourers arrived. The Vryn space station called Watchpoint 7 had been completely transformed. On the surface, it looked like a massive facility that processed exotic matter. This was exactly the type of high-value target the Devourers had attacked in the last war. The energy signature was deliberately amplified to appear 50 times stronger than it actually was. It broadcast across the quantum spectrum like a bright flame. Doyen stood in the station's command center. Beings from 30 different species surrounded him. Each one brought expertise to what most privately called the Champion's Gambit. Doyen still felt like a fraud wearing that title. Final status report, he said. His voice was steadier than he felt inside. Commander Thelkar stepped forward. All 600 fleets are positioned. 400 are hidden in quantum shadow. The Devourers should not detect them until weapons range. The remaining 200 are arranged in standard defensive posture they will expect. Xenobiology team? Doyen turned to a group of researchers. Dr. Hana stepped forward. She was the only other human on the project. She was a biologist who had been studying the Devourers from ancient samples. We have confirmed the targeting hypothesis. The Devourers navigate by detecting complex information structures. Dense networks of data, energy patterns, technological signatures. They are drawn to sophistication like moths to flame. The fake node we created should be irresistible. Should be? Thelkar growled. Nothing about the Devourers is certain, Hana replied calmly. But the pattern confidence is 93%. They will come here. And the purge weapon? Doyen asked. Velmoth moved forward. His forearms manipulated holographic controls. The Spire of Dissolution has been activated. It is uncomfortable to use such a weapon. It was banned after the last war. The Spire was a weapon that broke reality itself. It did not just destroy matter, but erased it completely. It made things stop existing. Using it was considered an atrocity by most galactic civilizations. But desperate times required desperate measures. If this works, Doyen said quietly, we will not need it again. If it does not work, there will be no one left to judge us for using it. Comforting, Taman muttered from his position at the communication station. Mira was handling tactical coordination. She pulled up the fleet positions. All units report ready. Admiral Kesh wants to know if you plan to address the forces. Doyen blinked. Address them? I thought Thelkar was commanding the fleet. He is, Thelkar said. But they want to hear from the champion. You carry the blade of Korvan. That means something to warriors of every species. They need to know what they are fighting for. I am really not good at speeches. Then do not make a speech, the old general replied. Tell them what you told the council. Remind them why we are doing this differently. Doyun took a breath and activated the fleet-wide channel. Hundreds of thousands of faces appeared on screens throughout the command center. Warriors from species he barely knew how to pronounce, all of them watching him. I am not going to give you a warrior speech, he began. I am not a warrior. A month ago I was studying water systems on colony worlds. Then the blade chose me and I still do not entirely know why. But I have learned something in the last few weeks. He paused, gathering his thoughts. The Devourers are terrifying. They are powerful. They nearly destroyed the galaxy last time. But they are also just a system. A very complex, very dangerous system, but still a system. And systems have weaknesses. They have patterns. They have failure points. We are not going to beat them by being stronger or braver than the warriors who fought them before. We are going to beat them by being smarter, by adapting, by trying something they will not expect. He held up the blade. Its light reflected in the camera. This weapon has been carried by 12 champions before me. Each one fought differently. Each one brought something unique. I am bringing perspective, the ability to see this as a problem to solve rather than a destiny to fulfill. In a few hours, the Devourers will arrive. If our plan works, we will draw a large portion of their force into a trap and destroy them decisively. If it does not work, we will adapt again, and again, and again, because that is what thinking beings do. We learn, we change, we find new solutions. He smiled slightly. Krelmoth, the last champion, was known for never compromising, never hesitating. That was his strength and maybe his weakness. I am going to compromise constantly. I am going to hesitate when hesitation saves lives. I am going to question every assumption, including my own, and I need all of you to do the same. The Devourers consume and adapt, so we will adapt faster. They learn from what they destroy, so we will teach them wrong lessons. They expect us to meet them with rage and desperation. Instead, we will meet them with creativity and precision. Doyen lowered the blade. I do not know if this makes me a good champion, but I know it makes us different from last time, and different is what we need. So let us show these things what happens when they pick a fight with beings who refuse to follow old patterns. He closed the channel. The command center was silent for a moment. Then Thelkar began a slow rhythmic striking of his armored plates. A Vryn gesture of approval. Others joined in their own ways. The Hesh rattled their scales. The Quintar chimed melodically. The humans simply clapped. That was actually pretty good, Taman said. I have no idea what I just said. You reminded them they are not alone, Mira replied, and that thinking is a weapon too. It was perfect. The sensors began screaming. Every screen in the command center switched to the same view. The barrier zone, the edge of mapped space, was turning dark. Not dark as in absence of light, but dark as in presence of something that consumed light. The Devourers had arrived. Fleet-wide alert, Thelkar barked. All units to combat stations. Activate the decoy beacon at maximum intensity. Let us see if we are as clever as we think we are. Doyen watched the displays as the darkness began to move. It was not a fleet in any traditional sense. It was more like a living void. Tendrils of corrupted physics reaching across the galaxy. Where it touched, stars dimmed. Where it paused, entire star systems went silent. They are scanning, Hana reported. Her voice was tight. Mass deployment of sensor probes. They are identifying targets. Continue broadcasting, Doyen ordered. Make us look delicious. Minutes passed like hours. The darkness continued its advance, spreading in multiple directions as predicted. But the largest concentration, the central mass, began shifting toward Watchpoint 7. They are taking the bait, Velmoth breathed. Do not celebrate yet, Thelkar warned. They could be testing us. Could be a feint while the main force goes elsewhere. But the sensors did not lie. 70% of the Devourer force was now moving toward the fake node. They were accelerating to speeds that bent physics. They would arrive in 3 hours. Begin fleet repositioning, Doyen ordered. Quietly. Do not let them know we are ready. The next 3 hours were the longest of Doyen's life. He watched as the Devourers approached. Their true nature became clearer on the sensors. They were not ships. They were more like constructs of weaponized physics, entities that existed partially outside normal reality. They consumed not by destroying but by absorbing, by incorporating, by becoming. 1 hour to contact, Mira announced. Doyen felt the blade warming in his hand. It knew battle was coming. 30 minutes, the command center was absolutely silent now. Everyone watching, everyone waiting. 10 minutes. They are slowing down. Formation is strange. They are surrounding the station but maintaining distance. They are cautious, Hana said. They sense something is wrong, but the target is too valuable to ignore. 5 minutes to firing range. Doyen made himself breathe slowly. Everything depended on the next few minutes. If they had miscalculated, if the Devourers had evolved beyond their previous patterns, if the trap was not convincing enough. They are committing, Thelkar said suddenly. Full assault formation. Here they come. The darkness rushed toward Watchpoint 7 like a wave of void. Now, Doyen shouted. The hidden fleets appeared. 400 warships materialized from quantum shadow. Their weapons were already firing. They surrounded the Devourers in a sphere of overwhelming firepower. The 200 visible fleets joined in. The trap became a furnace of directed energy. Spire of dissolution charging, Velmoth reported. The Devourers reacted with terrifying speed. Their formation shifted and adapted. They began consuming the incoming fire, growing stronger, exactly as historical records predicted. But they were concentrated now, packed into the kill zone, exactly where Doyen wanted them. "Spire at maximum charge," Velmoth announced. "Fire," Doyen ordered. The station vanished in a pulse of unlight. Reality bent inward, creating a point that did not destroy matter but erased it. The Devourers, caught in the effect, began to simply cease existing. Not dying, not exploding, just stopping. "Maintain fire," Thelkar commanded. "Do not let any escape." The battle lasted 17 minutes. When it ended, 70% of the Devourer force was gone, not destroyed, erased. The remaining 30% scattered across the galaxy were being engaged by local defense fleets. The command center erupted in celebration. Beings were crying, cheering, embracing across species barriers. Doyen sat down heavily. The blade was still in his hand. He started laughing. Not from joy exactly, but from pure relief and the absurdity of it all. A month ago, he was studying water. Now he had helped destroy an existential threat using principles from fixing broken pipes. Mira sat beside him. "It worked. Your insane plan actually worked." "First step worked," Doyen corrected. "We have 30% still out there. And they just learned something from this. They will adapt." "So we will adapt back," Taman said. "That's what you said, right? We keep changing. We keep thinking. We keep finding new solutions." "Yeah," Doyen agreed. He looked at the blade. It had dimmed back to its usual glow. "I guess that is exactly what I said." Thelkar approached. Then he did something Doyen had never seen. He dropped to one knee. "You are the champion," the old general said. "Not because you are the greatest warrior, but because you taught us to fight a different war. Krelmoth would have met them head-on and died gloriously. You made them come to us and destroyed them efficiently. There is no greater victory." Doyen helped him up, feeling awkward. "We are not done yet." "No," Thelkar agreed. "But we proved something. The blade chose well." 42 days after the Battle of Watchpoint 7, Doyen stood before the ruins of what had been a living colony world. The Devourers' remaining forces had learned from their defeat. They had stopped taking bait. Instead, they had broken into smaller groups, hitting softer targets, adapting their tactics with terrifying speed. 12 worlds lost. Billions dead. "This is my fault," Doyen said quietly. Mira stood beside him. They were looking at the devastation through the viewport of their transport ship. "This is war," she replied. "You won the first battle decisively." They adapted. "Now we adapt again." People keep saying that. But adaptation is not free. It costs lives while we figure things out. He gestured to the dead world below. "These people paid for my learning curve." Krelmoth lost 90% of the Dominion's forces before achieving victory, Velmoth said, entering the observation deck. "You have saved millions by ending parts of the war more quickly. But you are right to mourn the losses. It means you have not become what Krelmoth became." What was that? Numb. In the final years, he viewed casualties as mere statistics. The rage that made him strong also made him cruel. He stopped seeing individuals and saw only numbers. Acceptable losses. Necessary sacrifices. The priest's expression was sad. It made him effective but hollow. When he finally fell, some whispered it was because he had lost his reason to fight. He was winning, but he no longer remembered why victory mattered. Doyen looked at the blade in his hand. It had become permanent, as much part of him as his own arm. "I cannot become that." "Then do not," Mira said simply. "You are not him. You never will be." "That is the point." Taman arrived with a data pad. New intelligence from the scouts. The Devourers have split into 47 distinct groups. Each one is using different tactics. It is like they are experimenting, learning what works against us. They are problem-solving, Doyen realized, just like I am. We are in a race of adaptation. Can we win that race? Velmoth asked. Maybe, but not by trying to out-adapt them move by move. That is reactive thinking. Doyen began pacing. His engineer's mind was working. We need to change the game entirely. Make them adapt to something fundamentally different. Explain, Thelkar demanded, entering the room. The old general looked exhausted. Coordinating defense across the galaxy was taking its toll. The Devourers consume and learn. That is their strength. But it is also a weakness. They depend on input. They need to consume to evolve. Doyen pulled up star charts. What if we stopped feeding them? We cannot simply abandon every world in their path. No, but we can evacuate them. Strip them of everything valuable. Leave nothing but empty planets. He highlighted the devourer movements. They are spreading out because concentrated targets get trapped. Fine, let them spread. Let them consume empty worlds while we consolidate our forces around what actually matters. You want to trade territory for time? Thelkar looked doubtful. I want to trade nothing for everything. Every empty world they consume teaches them nothing. Every hour they waste on barren rocks is an hour we use to prepare. Meanwhile, we stop trying to predict where they will go. We start dictating where they cannot go. Hana entered carrying samples from the devastated world. I have been analyzing the devourer remains from Watchpoint 7. I found something interesting. They do not just consume. They communicate. They share information across their network, learning collectively. That is even worse, Mira said. Or it is an opportunity, Doyun countered. If they share information, can we poison that information? Feed them false data? A technological virus? Hana considered it. Theoretically possible. But we would need to understand their communication system, and we would need something they want to consume that contains the virus. Doyun smiled. Not a happy expression, but one of grim satisfaction. I know exactly what they would want to consume. 3 hours later, he stood before the War Council with the most dangerous proposal yet. You want to let them consume the blade? Thelkar roared. Have you lost your mind? Not the real blade, a fake, but one that broadcasts the same energy signature, contains the same exotic matter signature, appears identical in every way that matters to their sensors. Doyun held up the actual blade. This thing is a legend. It has reshaped galactic history. The Devourers would know that. They consumed records from thousands of worlds in the last war. They would recognize its value. And the trap? Felmoth asked. Dr. Hana has developed a mimetic virus, a malicious idea encoded in quantum states. If the Devourers consume the fake blade, they consume the virus. It spreads through their communication network, corrupting their ability to distinguish valuable targets from worthless ones. They will start making mistakes, and mistakes we can exploit. The risk is catastrophic, Admiral Kesh argued. If they realize it is a trap, they will know we can create fakes. They will never trust their sensors again. They will become even more cautious, more paranoid. And if the virus does not work, we have wasted resources on an elaborate deception. All true, Doyun admitted. But consider this. The Devourers are learning to fight us conventionally. They are becoming an enemy we know how to face. That is dangerous for them. If we let them think they understand us, they become predictable. But if we introduce chaos, uncertainty, false information, we turn their greatest strength into a weakness. This is insane, Thelkar muttered, but he was smiling. I am starting to understand why the blade chose you. You fight like no warrior I have ever known. You weaponize confusion. I weaponize systems thinking, Doyun corrected. The Devourers are a system. Complex, adaptive, but still a system. And every system can be hacked. The Council debated for hours. Species who had fought the Devourers for thousands of years argued against taking such risks. Younger voices argued for trying anything that might end the war faster. In the end, it came down to one question. Did they trust the champion? The vote was narrow but passed. Over the next 23 days, the most elaborate deception in galactic history was constructed. A fake blade perfect in every measurable way. A quantum virus woven into its structure. A staged disaster where Doyun appeared to lose the blade in combat, letting it fall into Devourer hands. Doyun volunteered to make the deception convincing. Against strong protests, he took a small ship into Devourer territory, engaged a minor force, and lost the fake blade in the chaos. He barely made it back alive. That was stupid, Mira told him as medical teams treated his injuries. You could have died. Had to be convincing, Doyun gasped. His ribs were broken. The Devourer's weapons had done something strange to his nervous system. Had to make them believe. Next time we hire an actor, Taman said, but his voice was shaky. Preferably one who does not almost die for authenticity. They waited. 6 days of silence. The Devourers had taken the bait. But had they consumed it? Was the virus working? Then the reports started coming in. Devourer forces attacking empty space. Devourer forces bypassing valuable targets. Devourer forces turning on each other, their corrupted sensors identifying their own kind as resources to consume. The virus had worked. It is not permanent, Hana warned. They will eventually purge it from their systems. But it has bought us confusion. A window of opportunity. Then we use it, Doyon said. He was still recovering, but his mind was clear. Thelkar, coordinate all fleets. Hit them while they are disorganized. No mercy, no hesitation. We end this now. The final battle lasted 11 days. It was not glorious. It was brutal, efficient, methodical. Dominion fleets struck confused Devourer forces again and again, destroying them in pieces. When the Devourers tried to regroup, they found their communication channels poisoned with false data. When they tried to adapt, they adapted to phantom threats. On the 11th day, the last Devourer construct was destroyed at the edge of the barrier zone. For the first time in 347 years, the galaxy was free of their threat. The cost had been devastating. 14 worlds lost, 300 million lives. But compared to the last war, compared to the 90% casualties Krelmoth had endured, it was a miracle. Doyon stood in the Grand Temple where his journey had begun. The real blade of Korvan was in his hand. The weapon had grown dimmer over the final days, as if its purpose was being fulfilled. It is over, Velmoth said softly. The Devourers are gone. The galaxy is safe. You have succeeded where 12 champions before you struggled. Krelmoth defeated them too. After decades of war, after the galaxy was nearly broken, you did it in less than 3 cycles using methods he never considered. The priest studied him. Laughter. You defeated them with thinking, with adaptation, with creativity. You defeated them by remaining who you are instead of becoming what everyone expected. The blade pulsed one final time. Then something extraordinary happened. It began to dissolve. The exotic matter broke down into harmless light. Within seconds it was gone. Only empty air remained. What? Doyon stared at his empty hand. The blade serves until its purpose is complete, Velmoth explained. Then it returns to Korvan, to wait for the next war, the next champion. You are released from service. Doyon felt the absence sharply. For nearly 3 cycles the blade had been part of him. And now, I can go back to studying water systems. You can do whatever you wish, the priest said with something like a smile. Though I suspect the galaxy will not soon forget the champion who fought with laughter. Outside, Taman and Mira waited. When Doyon emerged, bladeless and released, just himself again, they embraced him without words. So, Taman finally said, there is a colony world called Kepler 442c that needs a new water management system. I hear it is a nightmare of contaminated aquifers and broken filtration. Thought you might be interested. Doyon laughed. A real laugh, genuine and relieved. That sounds perfect. They left the temple together. 3 humans who had witnessed history, ready to return to the simple problems of colony management and water engineering. Behind them, the Vryn began preparing victory celebrations that would last months. But Doyon was already thinking about water pressure equations and purification systems. The galaxy had needed a champion who could think differently. Now it needed the same thing every civilization always needed. Someone to make sure clean water reached everyone who needed it. That was a job he actually understood. As they boarded the transport back to human space, Velmoth watched from the temple steps. He whispered a prayer to Korvan, thanking the war god for sending exactly the champion they needed. Not a warrior, but a thinker. And most importantly, someone who could laugh at carved faces and find joy even in the darkest moments. Perhaps that was the greatest weapon of all.